Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into a fascinating, maybe even a slightly strange world, the intellectual landscape of late 19th century New England.
And we're doing it through the eyes of someone who had a, let's say, complicated relationship with it, Henry James.
Complicated is putting it mildly. I mean, we found these letters. In 1872, he's writing to Charles Eliot Norton, and he just slams his own hometown, Cambridge and Boston, calls the life there defined by its aridity and vacuousness.
Yeah, arid and vacuous. Pretty harsh words for a 28-year-old describing home. And what's really striking is he uses that exact phrase again, doesn't he?
He does. Decades later, 1913, it shows this lifelong ambivalence, this conflict he had. But then here's the twist.
Right. Only about 12 years after that first letter, he writes The Bostonians.
Exactly. A novel dedicated specifically to that supposedly arid region. It seems like such a contradiction.
Well, that's sort of the paradox we want to explore today, isn't it? The Bostonians is James plunging right back into that world, but maybe finding something else underneath the surface. Not emptiness, but maybe a dangerous kind of intensity.
Intensity is a good word. The book is just swimming in the fervor of social reform movements after the Civil War. Idealism, belief, but also the psychological cost of that kind of, well, zealotry.
So our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is to see how James uses this love triangle, a really intense one, to dissect the ideological battles of the time. Post-Reconstruction America, North versus South.
And also these emerging ideas about celebrity, how idealism gets packaged and sold, and what happens to people psychologically when they're caught up in these huge consuming beliefs.
And it all revolves around three key figures. You've got Olive Chancellor. She's the Boston feminist, wealthy, incredibly passionate, almost tragically so.
Then there's Basil Ransom. He's her opposite in almost every way. A conservative lawyer from the South, poor, proud, carrying the weight of the Confederacy's defeat.
And the prize they're both fighting over is Verena Tarrant. She's this young, incredibly charismatic speaker, kind of an inspirational orator. But, and this is crucial, she doesn't seem to have much of a core herself. No inner fixity, as James puts it.
Which makes her the perfect battleground for Olive and Basil's opposing worldviews. It's like a fight for her soul that really represents a much bigger fight happening in America at the time.
Okay, so to really get Olive Chancellor, this figure of intense northern zeal, we probably need to understand the air she breathed, right? The whole James family environment tells you a lot about that New England culture.
Absolutely. It was steeped in reform, moral urgency, conviction was everything. And the Civil War just amplified all of that. It wasn't abstract for the Jameses either.
No, not at all. Henry's younger brothers, Wilkie and Bob, they both enlisted for the Union. Wilkie especially. I mean, talk about idealism. He was just 17.
17. And he ends up as adjutant to Colonel Robert Goldshaw.
In the 54th Massachusetts, the famous regiment of black troops, he was right there in the thick of it.
And paid a price. He was badly wounded at Fort Wagner, that horrific assault in Charleston. He survived, thankfully, but it shows the personal cost, the reality behind the ideals for that family.
Definitely. And that commitment didn't just vanish when the war ended. If anything, it morphed into this utopian drive.
Right. The desire to remake the world was still burning bright. You see it in that venture Wilkie and Robertson tried.
Oh, the Florida plantation.
Yeah.
Funded by their father, Henry Sr., who was very progressive. The idea was to employ formerly enslaved black workers, build this new kind of community.
A really high-minded, idealistic plan. But it failed, didn't it?
It did. It was perhaps a bit naive, but it perfectly captures that spirit, this belief in immediate practical transformation, almost utopian thinking that was so prevalent.
And this environment wasn't just politically charged, it was intellectually buzzing, but also kind of permeable. James talks about imported ideas flooding in.
Yes, and leading to what one source calls a miasmic coupling of concepts. It sounds a bit dramatic, but look at Henry James Sr. himself.
The patriarch. He was fascinating. Deeply into two very different thinkers at the same time.
On one hand, you have Emanuel Swedenborg, the Swedish mystic, all about spiritual enlightenment, interpreting scripture in this sort of angelic, otherworldly way.
Heavenly correspondences, that kind of thing. Very ethereal.
And then, simultaneously, he's all in on Charles Fourier, the French social philosopher.
Who was focused on radical, almost scientific, social reorganization, dreaming up these utopian communities, these phalanxes.
Exactly. Self-sustaining communities designed to let people live, passionate, harmonious lives free from normal constraints.
So you've got angels in spiritual realms rubbing shoulders with detailed plans for communal living and liberated passions. It's quite a mix, isn't it?
It really is. It suggests a culture desperately seeking perfection, maybe, but pulling in completely different directions, the spiritual path and the social material path, trying to perfect everything at once.
And when you're striving that hard, maybe the door's open to, well, let's call it the nutty fringe, as the sources do.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Rigorous intellectual debate existed alongside things that were, let's say, more questionable, but definitely in vogue.
Like mesmerism, hypnosis, suggestion, that was huge. And spiritualism, seances, contacting the dead. Very fashionable in certain circles.
The James family itself shows the split perfectly. You have William James.
The philosopher, psychologist, a foundational figure.
Right. And he kept this lifelong, complicated openness to spiritualism. There's even that story about him asking his wife to try and contact him after he died.
Did she?
Apparently she tried, but nothing. No message came through.
But then you contrast that with Henry Jr.'s reaction.
Oh, completely different.
Yeah.
When some medium reported a phantom voice supposedly speaking for William from the great beyond, Henry was just disgusted. He called it, what was the quote?
The most abject and impudent, the hollowest, vulgarest, and basest rubbish. He minced no words.
No, he really didn't. He saw that side of New England fervor as cheap, maybe even vulgar, just not intellectually serious.
And it wasn't just about the spirit world. This quest for purity and self-improvement extended to the body too, didn't it? Health fads were everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Vegetarianism was big. And then there was Fletcherism.
Ah, Fletcherism. Horst Fletcher's big idea, chewing your food. How many times was it?
An enormous number of times.
Yeah.
Until it was basically liquid mush before you swallowed.
Good Lord. And Henry James Jr. actually did this for a while.
He did. You could just picture him at the dinner table, diligently mushing away
Yeah.
in his own quest for health and self-improvement.
It's almost comical, but it perfectly illustrates that relentless drive for perfection, even in the most mundane things, though apparently it backfired.
Well, according to his brother William, who was a doctor, remember, he later blamed Fletcherism for Henry's myriad bowel troubles. So maybe not the best idea.
Okay, so we have this incredibly active, buzzing intellectual climate, people arguing about angels, utopia, spiritualism, chewing techniques. Why on earth did James call it arid and vacuous? It sounds anything but empty.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The sources suggest James felt American culture, especially New England's, was just too young and too thin.
Too thin, meaning lacking depth.
Yeah, lacking the deep historical roots, the layers of complexity he found and craved in Europe. He saw all this idealism, all this energy, but felt that it wasn't grounded in a rich, visible history. It felt shallow, maybe.
So the activity was frantic, but it didn't have the substance, the weight of history behind it. That's why Europe kept pulling him away.
Pretty much. He needed that old invisible history, the ruins, the complex social codes, to nourish him as an artist. New England, for all its intellectual fireworks, felt structurally weak to him.
So the aridity wasn't a lack of ideas, but maybe a lack of soil for those ideas to properly root themselves in. And that instability, that perhaps ungrounded zeal, leads us right to Olive Chancellor.
Exactly. She embodies that fervent, high-minded, but maybe ultimately fragile New England idealism.
Okay, so if that's the backdrop, this world of intense, maybe ungrounded idealism, the novel zooms in on two characters who are like polar opposites, embodying the clash of post-Civil War America, Olive Chancellor and Basil Ransom.
Let's start with Olive. James paints her with such psychological intensity right from the start. She's described as stiff, humorless, prejudiced.
Possessing a nervous organization, it says, but also without laughter. Any joy she feels is dumb. It's like all her passion is turned inward or channeled into this one thing.
But she's not just a stereotype, is she? James gives her real depths, tragic dimensions even. And that's because, as the analysis suggests, she feels most deeply of all the characters.
And all that feeling, all that passion gets poured into this single crusade, fighting the historical unhappiness of women.
It's more than just politics for her. It's almost a religious calling, deeply personal and apocalyptic in scope. She feels the weight of centuries of female suffering, that ocean of tears she believes they've shed.
And she sees her role as forcing men, the brutal, blood-stained, ravening race, as she calls them, to pay for it, to exact the last particle of expiation.
That language, blood-stained, ravening, it's incredibly strong. And it connects back to her own story, doesn't it? Echoing the James family's own experience.
Yes, the sources are clear. Olive lost her only two brothers in the Civil War. So this feminist cause isn't just an abstract ideal for her.
No, it's a way to make sense of that loss, perhaps, to make it sacred. She calls it the only sacred cause, the great, the just revolution. It gives meaning to the sacrifice.
But then James introduces this layer of irony, this disconnect. She loves the idea of the people, the masses of women she wants to liberate.
But she struggles to actually connect with them. The
Hmm.
sources mention her difficulty with the pale shop maidens.
Right. Who always seem to be odiously mixed up with Charlie. They care more about romance, about men, than about getting the vote, which just drives Olive mad.
It highlights a potential flaw in her kind of zeal, maybe. It's so focused on the grand historical narrative, on expiation, that it misses the messiness of actual human desire, something she herself seems unable to engage with.
Okay, so that's Olive. Now, swing the pendulum to the other extreme. Basil Ransom.
Her antagonist. He is the South personified, or at least the defeated, resentful South. He's described as an indigent but proud survivor, a lawyer from Mississippi whose family back home is living in penurious circumstances of defeat.
That sense of loss and humiliation just permeates his character, doesn't it?
Completely. He carries this quiet hunger for vengeance, and you see it flare up when he first meets Olive in Boston, sitting in her wealthy, comfortable home, her cushioned feminine nest.
He feels totally out of place, unhoused and underfed, grinding his teeth at the contrasts of the human lot.
It's not just about money. It's about the clash of ideologies. Her northern progressivism feels like a constant reminder of his southern defeat. And he tries to push back, right? He tries to get his own ideas out there.
Yeah, he writes these essays promoting his conservative views, but he just hits a wall in the North. They keep getting rejected.
There's that brutal line from an editor who tells him he might have found a publisher.
300 years earlier. Ouch.
Exactly. His ideas are just fundamentally too unpopular for that reform-minded environment.
Yeah.
He can't get a foothold, which just fuels his bitterness.
And he hates the whole reform movement, especially when it involves women in public life. He's against women voting and preaching and all that sort of thing.
His view of women is strictly private, social. He actually says the position of women is to make fools of men. That's their sphere in his mind.
He's the voice of extreme reaction. Things like the temperance movement just fill him with rage. He genuinely seems to believe civilization is at risk if women gain power in the public square.
He talks about society being controlled by a herd of vociferating women. It's quite visceral.
Which brings us to his motivation regarding Verena. It's chillingly clear. Olive wants to amplify Verena's public voice, make her a beacon for the cause. Basil wants
the exact opposite. His goal, plain and simple, is to silence her, to shut her up altogether.
Take her off the stage, remove her from the public sphere that he sees as inherently masculine. Her influence there needs to be destroyed for his vision of order to be restored.
It's a direct assault on everything Olive stands for, and Verena is the symbolic territory they're fighting over.
So Verena Tarrant, she's the center of this storm, the prize in this ideological tug-of-war. And James makes her origins just perfectly reflect that fragmented, slightly weird New England culture we talked about earlier.
Yeah, her description is almost deliberately vague, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pretty, weak, and very charming, doesn't give you much solid ground.
And her Paris, it's such a quintessentially Bostonian mix of the era's preoccupations. Her father, Sella Tarrant,
He's described as a Cambridge quack healer,
yeah,
a mesmerist, basically.
and her mother is the daughter of an abolitionist, Abraham Greenstreet. So you've got mysticism on one side, high-minded reform on the other. Verena is literally the child of both.
And her upbringing sounds completely bizarre. The sources paint this picture of her childhood.
She had sat on the knees of somnambulists and had been passed from hand to hand by trance speakers.
Imagine. Familiar with every kind of cure raised around people who disapproved of the marriage tie. She's never really known a stable, conventional center.
Which maybe explains her gift, this talent for inspirational speaking. James describes it less like reasoned argument and more like
a musical performance. She's just spinning vocal sounds to a silver thread. It's captivating, almost hypnotic, but maybe not entirely substantial. Basil even thinks of her as like a nymph, something otherworldly.
But the analysis suggests her power comes from an absence, not a presence. She lacks that inner fixity, that solid sense of self.
Right. When people ask her where her speeches come from, she has that famous line, "Oh, it isn't me, it's something outside."
That's the key, isn't it? She doesn't own her own voice. She sees herself as just a channel.
Which makes her incredibly malleable. An empty vessel, as the critics say, just filled up with the words and ideas, the dead phrases of whoever is controlling her at the time.
First, it's her father's sort of mystical jargon. Then it's Olive's high-flown feminist rhetoric. And finally, it's Basil's dominating perspective. She reflects them all.
And this emptiness, this lack of a core self, makes her the perfect case study for James as he starts to dissect something new that's emerging. American celebrity culture.
He was so ahead of his time on this, seeing how public life could hollow a person out, turn them into an image, a commodity.
You see the commodification starting with her father, Selah. He's less a healer and more a manager, right?
Totally. He's described as a humbug obsessed with the idea of public recognition and the money to be made from it. He doesn't care about the cause itself, just the publicity.
His dream, his ideal of bliss, is just to be part of the newspaper. Like literally as the title and date, just to be recorded, recognized.
And that description of his smile, noiseless as a patent hinge, so mechanical, so devoid of warmth, all performance.
He's the old-style charlatan, maybe. But then James introduces Matthias Parton, the journalist, and he represents the future of media manipulation.
Yeah, Parton, the thoroughly modern young man, with white hair already at 28, maybe suggesting the burnout rate of this new media age.
Could be. And his whole philosophy is summed up in that amazing phrase. He sees the mission of mankind as a perpetual evolution of telegrams.
Constant, frantic, disposable news. Information churn. He doesn't see Verena as a person or even an idealist. He sees her purely as potential content, product.
His goal is straightforward. Get her name in the biggest kind of bills. Get her portrait in shop windows. Make her famous.
And he even wants to marry her, not out of love, but so he can produce her in public more effectively. And that phrase, work her, as it were, scientifically.
Chilling, isn't it? Using his media connections, the principal dailies, to exploit her gift for maximum profit and exposure.
It's a really stark vision of how quickly idealism gets co-opted by commerce and the hunger for fame. James saw that the very intensity of the era's causes made them vulnerable to being turned into spectacles.
Okay, so the battle lines are drawn. Now, in the later part of the novel, the fight for Verena gets much more personal, much more psychological, and Basil Ransom finally gets a break.
Right. After all those rejections, he finally gets one of his essays published in the Rational Review, of all places.
And the topic is kind of ironic, isn't it? Something about the rights of minorities, which, coming from him...
Yeah, it's loaded, but getting published is huge for him psychologically, even if it doesn't make him rich.
Absolutely. It gives him this sense of a new public voice. And that newfound public legitimacy empowers his private utterance.
Meaning his marriage proposal to Verena. He feels like he can finally speak to her as an equal, or maybe even from a position of strength.
And his main weapon isn't really affection, it's rhetoric. Psychological warfare, almost. The sources point to that one devastating phrase he uses against her.
He calls her a preposterous puppet. Just cuts right to the core of her insecurity about her own voice, her authenticity.
Exactly. He accuses her of being manipulated, of being a fraud. And James shows how those words just burrow into her mind. They work and ferment.
What she thought was her own genuine passion for the cause now feels like evidence against her. The analysis says she had come at last to believe them.
And when she doubts herself, doubts the source of her own voice, her power starts to drain away. She can't speak with the same conviction.
While Basil is chipping away at Verena's confidence, Olive is facing her own crisis, her own moment of doubt. And interestingly, it connects back to that European aesthetic James himself was drawn to.
Right. During that visit to Henry Burrage's rooms, Burrage is this wealthy Harvard student studying law just for the form. He represents everything Olive supposedly rejects: leisure, art, tradition.
His rooms are full of beautiful things: ivory carving, a Cinquecento cup, old world refinement.
And Olive, the rigid Puritan, finds herself momentarily seduced.
Right.
She's listening to Burrage play Schubert and Mendelssohn.
And surrounded by all this beauty, she has this moment where civilization, the very thing she's fighting against, suddenly seems, well, appealing.
Yeah, it appeared to have done its work, James writes. She actually asks herself why one should have a quarrel with it. Just for a second, the fight goes out of her.
But that softness doesn't last long, does it? Mrs. Burrage shows up with this plan to invite Verena to New York.
And Olive immediately sees it as a plot, a direct threat to her control, her relationship with Verena. Her defenses go right back up.
The tension keeps building until they get to Marmion, that summer resort.
Yeah.
Ransom follows them there. He's feeling confident now. His article is about to come out.
And Verena is really struggling internally. She finally breaks down and confesses something to Olive.
She admits Ransom came to see her secretly back in Cambridge, which James calls the only secret she had in the world. It's a huge admission of divided loyalty.
She basically throws herself on Olive's mercy, asks Olive to protect her from Ransom, saying she's unarmed against him.
Which leads to Olive's final desperate move, that demand she makes out in the cold night air.
Promise me not to marry. It's her last attempt to hold Verena through loyalty, through the cause.
But it's too late, isn't it? The sources say Verena realizes in that moment that the truth had changed sides.
She's fallen for Ransom.
Yeah.
She feels caught up in this intense passion, and her old convictions, her feminist beliefs, just crumble away. They become colorless dust. The private desire has completely overwhelmed the public commitment. So everything comes to a head in the final section. The setting is brilliant. The New York Music Hall. Not Boston, the heartland of reform, but New York.
And it's during a meeting of the Wednesday Club, which is presented as New York's slightly less authentic attempt to be intellectually serious like Boston. More about culture and good form.
Ransom is there. He got an invitation.
Probably from Verena herself, right? A sort of unconscious cry for help or maybe self-destruction.
Could be. He stands at the back watching, and he sees Olive in the front row, perfectly still, just radiating this anticipated concentration of triumph. She thinks this is Verena's moment and Ransom's defeat.
The atmosphere must be incredibly tense. Verena gets up to speak. This is supposed to be her big New York debut.
And she delivers her core message, what the sources call her last public argument. She talks about men starving because they reject women's contribution, the genius, the intelligence, the inspiration of women.
She calls women the heart of humanity. And she throws out that challenge. Do you think any state of society can come to good that is based upon an organized wrong? It's powerful stuff, classic reform rhetoric.
But Ransom, listening at the back, it just doesn't touch him politically, because he's already decided she's a puppet.
Right. He hears the words, dismisses the argument intellectually as ridiculous, fantastic, delightful nonsense.
But his focus isn't on the ideas. It's entirely on her. Her presence, her beauty, her vulnerability. The ideology means nothing to him now. It's all about possession.
And then things start to fall apart on stage. Verena falters. She sees Ransom, his gaze fixed on her, judging her, and she can't speak. She delays.
The audience gets restless. The manager, Mr. Filer, and her father, Selah, they start to panic. The whole event is collapsing.
Ransom makes his move, gets backstage to the waiting room, and the scene he finds there is just utter devastation.
Olive Chancellor is completely broken, prostrate, fallen over, her head buried in the lap of Verena's mother, just sunk in sightless, soundless shame. Her entire world, political and personal, has just imploded.
And Verena sees Ransom and immediately clings to him. Oh, why did you come? Why?
She tells him she can't speak with him there, begs him to leave so she can at least try to go on, try to fulfill her promise to Olive.
But he sees right through it. He knows this isn't resistance, it's surrender. He perceives her as totally submissive, helpless.
He feels a flicker of pure pity for her pain, James writes, but it's immediately replaced by something else. The knowledge that he can do what he wants, he has all the power.
So when she asks him to leave, he refuses. And his reasoning is just ice cold. He says something like,
To leave you with her a while, for the last, seemed more decent, framing his staying there, his dominance, as a kind of propriety before the final separation. It's incredibly cruel.
It's the final assertion of his will over her obligation to Olive, to the cause.
And as the crowd outside starts to riot, shouting, groaning, hissing, Ransom doesn't hesitate. He physically takes Verena, pulls her away.
Ignores the manager shouting about the extreme penalty of the law. That means nothing now.
No. The novel ends with this stark image. Ransom bodily removing Verena from the public sphere, a triumph for him of private will over the public cause. The woman meant to liberate others is literally carried off into captivity. Hashtag outro.
Wow. It's such a powerful, almost brutal ending, isn't it? Ransom's victory feels so complete. He got exactly what he wanted from the start.
He did. His goal was to silence the public woman, possess the private one, and he succeeded. It's a clear win for his conservative, patriarchal ideology within the narrative.
And Olive. She really does achieve those tragic dimensions James aimed for. She feels everything, suffers everything, the public failure, the personal betrayal, the loss of her cause, and the person she loved.
And James denies her any kind of noble political martyrdom. She just gets humiliation, collapse. It's quite bleak.
Which brings us back to James's own stance. The sources suggest this interesting tension in the novel. It seems uncomfortable with causes, maybe seeing the political fervor as messy or even absurd.
But at the same time, it's deeply intimately comfortable with women, showing this profound respect for their emotional depth, their capacity for passion, even if it leads to tragedy.
Yet for Verena, the central figure, there's no real liberation, is there? Her fate seems sealed either way.
Exactly. She escapes All's demanding, idealistic, but ultimately stifling control, only to fall under Basil's dominating private will. He explicitly wants to keep her secluded, believing women are happiest just being agreeable to men.
She trades one form of being designed by others for another, the public cause for the private possessor.
Which loops back to that fundamental question about Verena's character, her power coming from her lack of self, her gift being something outside.
If James is showing us a world where women are primarily defined by these external forces, whether it's a political movement demanding their voice or a man demanding their submission, what happens to the individual?
Can someone like Verena, someone seemingly without that inner fixity, ever find her own footing? Can she carve out a space for a genuine self between these incredibly powerful, competing pressures?
That feels like the really unsettling question James leaves hanging. In a society that wants to mold women into symbols for causes or objects for men, is there room left for just Brina? Or is the self inevitably lost in the ideological crossfire?
It's a profound challenge, not just to the specific movements in the book, but maybe to the whole nature of zealous belief and how it shapes or consumes the individual. A really provocative thought to end on.